Let's turn now to Trymaine Lee. He's an MSNBC correspondent who has been closely following the trial. Trymaine is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a city that knows all too well how precarious justice can be. Trymaine, what are people there saying, and does this feel like a true inflection point?
That's right, Lester. This community has dealt with its fair share of injustice and issues with policing. But for just one moment, they were able to exhale and breathe because 1,000 miles away, a black family and a black man finally got justice. There was a man across the street in front of the church who got down on one knee because he was so joyful. But that joy came with wariness because he knows that justice for black America writ large beyond that family 1,000 miles away is still tenuous and fragile at best, Lester.
Trymaine, thank you. Joining me now is Washington Post columnist and NBC News and MSNBC political analyst Eugene Robinson. Eugene, talk about this moment. What does it mean for not just Floyd's family, but for the nation?
Lester, I think this is an inflection point. This does not mean that we have completed some sort of reckoning with racial justice. We have solved all the problems of policing in this country. We've got a lot of work to do, but this feels like a beginning rather than an ending to me. It feels like a very important day, an important result. From the moment we learned we would have a verdict to the minute that verdict was announced, I think I held my breath because we've been disappointed and devastated so many times before when it seemed that juries simply did not value black life, did not value the lives of African Americans or their rights, or their right just to walk down the street. It seemed that we were not seen as fully American. This jury did see George Floyd as a man in full, as a citizen of Minneapolis. They didn't see him as a thug or as an addict or someone who was problematic just by his existence. They saw him as someone who was wronged, was killed by police officers sworn to protect and defend the citizens of Minneapolis, and they acted accordingly in delivering these verdicts. And I think one of the most really significant things about this whole trial is that the Minneapolis police chief, Madara Arredondo, testified for the prosecution against one of his officers. We almost never have seen that happen in these sorts of police killing cases. And if that means that the sort of thin blue line of solidarity against these sort of justified complaints about policing, if that line is weakening or is gone, that's a really, really good thing for this country.
You know, even in the crowd, in the minutes leading up to today's verdict, there were people expressing doubts, no trust in the justice system. Does this restore some of the trust as seen through communities of color in this country?
I think it does, but only in a limited sense. I mean, look at what we're talking about here. The man, Derek Chauvin knelt on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, all of it captured on video from multiple angles and broadcast to the world, basically. You could not, that's not going to happen in every case. In some cases, we're going to have to take the words of witnesses. And in some cases, we're probably not going to have police officers as willing to testify against their fellow officers as was the case here. So I don't think anybody goes overboard and says, aha, we have had our reckoning with systemic racism, just in policing. I don't think anybody says that. But I think people can say this is a beginning. This really, had it gone a different way, we would be having an entirely different conversation. And
All right, Eugene Robinson, thank you for talking with us. And joining me now is former Hennepin County Public Defender Mary Moriarty. Mary, the jury deliberated for less than a day, as we said, somewhere around 11 hours. What do you make of this verdict, and what could it mean for Minneapolis and the country?
After hearing closing arguments and the trial itself, I didn't expect that the jury would be out very long. In fact, I thought that they would come back today. And that's because the state did an excellent job of presenting medical testimony, everything they needed, use of force testimony, and the defense really wasn't able to counter much of that. In some respects, I think this is everything for this community right now, but in other respects, it's just the first step. People heard our chief, Madera Arredondo, talk about his values, his ethics, which he very much believes in. He's a reformer. But we also know every day that cops like Chauvin continue to engage in this kind of behavior. It just doesn't rise to the level that it did in George Floyd. So there's this gap between the aspiration and what actually happens day to day. And so this is just a beginning, and people in the community are celebrating right now. But we also realize we have a long way to go.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.